I wanted to introduce our esteemed panel today. So we have three individuals who are joining us today. Michael Smith, he's an engineering and maintenance director with 30 years of construction, maintenance, manufacturing, and power plant experience. As the director of site services with AstraZeneca, he's worked on several renewables projects. And prior to his time at AstraZeneca, Michael worked at Indianapolis Power and Light as well as Whirlpool. We also have Robert Flores. He's the Vice President of Sustainability for Berry Global. He has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Iowa State. Robert's been with Berry for 12 years and leading sustainability globally at Berry since 2013. And Scott Fisher, who's the regional sales senior manager for North American IFCN Maintenance. He's been with RB Mead Johnson for almost 9 years. And prior to that, he worked at Whirlpool and Toyota. He's a certified energy manager from the Association of Energy Engineers, certified maintenance and reliability professional, and from the Society for Maintenance and Reliability Professionals. And he is a graduate from U of E with a mechanical engineering degree. So thank you all for your time today.
Good morning. Michael Smith, thank you for joining this morning and making your way in through the weather, as Josh mentioned. From an AstraZeneca standpoint, we're happy to share globally, nationally, and locally in Mount Vernon our sustainability endeavors. Locally, just from an opening slide, you know, we have tremendous partnership with IDEM in our environmental and sustainability endeavors. You know, with our environmental stewardships, our partners in pollution prevention. We're a VPP site, and likewise, you know, nationally, you know, where we stand on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the CDP recognizes AZ globally as one of the globe's top 100 sustainability companies. So, you know, we have a strong presence in sustainability, some strong corporate goals by 2025, of which we're going to share, and how we're working towards those goals locally. So next slide, please. A lot of people often wonder, AZ, what do they do out between Vanderburgh and Posey County? You know, what exactly do they make? What's their presence? So I put this slide together just to kind of show you. A lot of people think, you know, are they making vaccines for COVID? We're not a biomedical site, or a biological site, I should say. We're a small molecule, solid oral dosage drug manufacturer, particularly in the oncology, the cardiovascular and diabetes sectors. Some of the products we make down the lower right-hand corner are for SIGA. It's all over the national news right now. You'll see commercials on local television for the, you know, we've got a 50% growth in that product right now. And it's you know, what it's doing for diabetes and also heart disease and kidney disease. Now the FDA's approved it for use there. So a number of those products are all different variations of diabetic products. And then Tagrisso is a blood cancer drug, or excuse me, a lung cancer drug, and Calquence is a blood cancer drug, which we're bringing to site. So a lot of excitement here right now as we diversify our manufacturing portfolio. But the company in aggregate has over almost 170 new projects in the pipeline, which is very exciting in today's market. Next slide, please. So from a standpoint of AZ's purpose or their strategy, they really have three pillars centered around a patient's health. You know, access to healthcare. Health is the heart of our business. And then obviously, you know, from an environmental protection standpoint, if you're protecting the environment, that the health of the planet impacts all life and our patients. And then they truly are, with our values, ethics and transparency, whereas we're promoting equality and prosperity for all in a good environment. So next slide. At a high level, globally, I'd like to play this video to show you some of their stances and where we're headed globally, and what our commitments are. Thank you, Vicky, for playing that video. Next slide. So just to highlight from that video, back in 2015, AZ, they set some targets of where they wanted to be in the next 10 years and their presence on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. They wanted to double their environmental efficiency with newer energy, water, and waste targets. And that's what excited me coming here. You know, where we are with respect to our product environmental stewardship and, you know, as far as our, you know, how we look towards pharmaceuticals in the environment. And then we want to be sourcing 100% renewable energy by 2025. So I put in the middle of that page, our production here at Mount Vernon, I mentioned, we're booming. So we had 26% volume growth last year alone. We're expecting something near that again this year. So it's a tremendous task to work against these baseline targets towards efficiency gains. And we've done that. So I'm showing you just at Mount Vernon last year, we had a 13% improvement in our energy consumption. That's natural gas and energy as measured in megawatt hours, 10% efficiency use of water, our waste, our value stream mapping of our waste, we've approved 10% towards our target. And our greenhouse gas emissions are substantially reducing, and our recycling efforts are up 40%. So all that is just in 1 year against production targets that rose at least 25%. So we're headed, as stated, towards zero carbon emissions in all of our operations globally by 2025. You know, obviously HCFCs are a big issue as far as ozone depletion, and they intend to plant 50 million trees at different sites as part of this too. Just some highlights of where we stand locally against our global goals. Next slide, please. So one of the things we do that we think are novel and a bit different is this is just an example of how we chart our electricity consumption against our production. And so this is a 5-year trend from 2015, our baseline year, where we were making at or around 40 billion tablets. And you can see in the course of 5 years of what we've done in this plant alone and our efficiency towards electricity consumption. We have similar models for natural gas consumption that we use in our powerhouse to produce steam for all of our air handler system, which there are over 100 of those on site. So steam and chilled water efficiency, you know, and as we use electricity, and we also chart this type of data for water. So as you can see, in the midst of 5 years, we've made 187% change to that 2015 baseline in our electricity consumption with tremendous amounts of project work, surveys, audits, etc. And so, you know, these are unitless numbers, and we budget, track, and model our electricity usage with this model. I'm going to show you a slide later, or we also do it off of 10 years worth of NOAA weather data. You know, heating degree days, cooling degree days, and how we get accurate with our electricity, gas, and water tracking. Next slide, please. So in the midst of energy, which we'll continue to talk about, I wanted to show you this graphic slide. I took most of the metrics off of it for discrete and privacy reasons, but we have a tremendous value stream mapping effort going in the last 2 years between operations, our OpEx group, Six Sigma work, and particularly our environmental engineering staff. They're tremendous, and in our waste tracking. So our goal in the midst of this sustainability effort was to get, by the end of this year, get to the point where we're 0% waste to the landfill. How are we doing it? Well, in the pharma sector, we have certain pharma waste and GMP waste, gowning, disposable gowning, and all those sorts of things that have residue on them. That, certain things that can and can't go to the landfill, but we're very distinct in how we compact that waste, minimize transportation, and that all makes its way to Covanta and Indianapolis to get repurposed for steam energy. Likewise, our materials reuse is on the magnitude of 35% now, and we're recycling 10 to 15% of certain items, whether it be pallets, drums, metals, plastics, paper, cardboard, you name it. We have a lot of 40-gallon fiber drums, certain pallets that we used to, we'd use for a certain period of time, then maybe sell them or landfill them, but they do get repaired, put back in the system. So tremendous efforts there. Again, starting the fourth quarter of last year, we were roughly 4 to 6% to the landfill. And with a new compactor installation for our paper waste and our cafeteria waste, we're going to compact that, co-mingle that in a compactor stream, and it's also going to be repurposed to steam energy. And it's going to probably lessen our impact of landfill to 60 tons a year. So we hope to have that installed by March, commissioned in April or May, and be completely landfill free by the early summer. Next slide, please. Well over a year ago, our environmental teams, in conjunction with our facilities engineering teams and our sustainability groups, we've got a green team here on site. So there's probably 700 plus employees here, of which 80 members in some capacity work on sustainability teams, whether it be our campaigning efforts between batches and how we clean and how we schedule from a supply chain standpoint to minimize our cleans between batches for water conservation, our flushing efforts. We have teams that do nothing but study water consumption. We have people who are heavily involved in our recycling value stream mapping efforts. As we said, we've got heavy engineering influence towards what we're doing with renewable energy. And we're going to speak to that a little later, but we, in the midst of the last 2 years, we've spent several $1 million in project efforts with strong ROI towards air handler optimizations, our air changes in certain production suites, minimizing it, where we had single pass heating and cooling, and we're recirculating air, our reverse osmosis water and regaining energy from that, boiler condensate, or I should say steam condensate, getting almost 80% of it back to the powerhouse, etc. All kinds of boiler optimization, air handler optimization projects from an engineering standpoint. We also have a wildlife habitat on site, that people enjoy, whether they're lunch hour, before, after work, that sort of thing. But and several special events centered around waste, recycling, Earth Day, etc. But heavy concentration, though, on energy and water. Next slide, please. Just to give you an overall kind of panoramic view, I mentioned that in the southwestern corner of our facility, we're going to break ground in May. We've got a 2 megawatt solar project going in with room for expandability. Likewise, we're doing several feasibility studies for opportunities for cogeneration and fuels we might use in a turbine. We have a project where we're bringing a brand new HDPE potable water line to site, replacing several old lines to help with our microbiological situation and reducing flushing and improving cross chlorination, that sort of thing. So some exciting projects. That's just 3 of 6 sustainability projects we got going on right now. Others include air compressor optimization work in the GMP space, a lot of lighting projects. We continue to do LED lighting, etc. Next slide, please. So I mentioned, let's go on to the next slide. These are examples. So I mentioned earlier our efficiency gains and our with considerable production volume increases. This is a modeling effort that we're doing and working well. So we worked with Vectren, used some of their weather data. We're taking weather data from the NOAA, and from a standpoint of air handler optimization, boiler optimization, how we budget, track, and expend our utilities. We model off of that 10 years worth of weather data. We're fairly accurate in our prediction techniques, and can as far as hedging natural gas, as far as what we get at the city gate from Vectren, as far as how we're going to control our solar system in conjunction with other energy systems that'll work. We'll base load our solar, but how we purchase and nominate for other sources of energy. So we use this data to help us predict. And lastly, the last slide, I put together what I thought might stimulate for any large company, smaller company. This is just a handful. It's certainly not an all-inclusive list. And, I removed the financial data and everything from it, but just some really strong project examples that we've done here in this plant. We have, like I said, over 100 air handlers to feed conditioned air into production suites, all with steam and cooling coils, what have you. We've had several air handler projects where we reduced, actually removed a large belt-driven fan motor, which we all know, depending upon the service factor of the motor and the types of belts, can be efficient. And we have an array of small fans and with direct drive motors and VFDs and extensive tuned PID loops on these. So we only use the air we need with respect to air changes in that suite. So depending upon the weather conditions and the air needs and temperature needs in that suite, then out of that array of small motors, we're only energized to a much lesser extent, as opposed to running a large fixed speed motor or even a VFD control motor, just having one belt driven motor. So we've done that in several areas. We've got most of our major processes, we're metering water flow, and we're bringing that back into PI data, totalized flow data, where we can track it and trend it and understand our usage and how and where we flush. We've put VFDs on boiler feed water pumps, major lighting retrofits, as I mentioned. We had some older HVAC systems that were just single pass. And so we've put in recirculation ducts. We're doing heat recovery, airflow reduction there. Several waste reduction projects on our gowning waste. Just finished a new 1,250 ton chiller installation, very highly efficient. We've got 6 very large chillers ranging from 1,000 to 1,500 tons each. And then a tremendous amount of load leveling and controls optimization with VFDs on those chillers. I mentioned our new city water supply main and how we're sizing that for correct water treatment. Our compressed air, our demand side management system that we're doing, and cross-connecting air systems in multiple buildings with, with controllers. And lastly, our 2 megawatt ground mounted solar network that we're making expandable with opportunities maybe to tie in cogen or even another solar expansion and likely battery systems in the near future. So those are some project examples of where we're at and how we hope to get to our carbon neutrality goals and our sustainability goals by 2025. So I'll stop there, and I'll assume there's some questions that'll be held, and I'll be prepared to answer them at the conclusion of these presentations. I'll hand it back to you, Dorothy.
All right, great. Should I just jump in here? So I'm Rob Flores from Berry Global. I'm the Vice President of Sustainability. If you go ahead and go to the next slide. You know, I know everybody is hopefully familiar with Berry, you know, being right there along the Lloyd in the middle of town. And we definitely are an Evansville company, you know, founded in Evansville, been in Evansville a long time. But what many of you might not know is we actually have roughly 280 manufacturing facilities across the world. So whereas we are a local Evansville company, during the time that many of us have lived here, we've really grown and grown to be that, you know, rather than just an Evansville company, a global company. If you go ahead and go to the next slide. And just to highlight that, you know, we still have a heavy concentration here locally as well as throughout the Midwest and Southeast, but we've really grown to capture that global footprint and supply, you know, leading brand owners, including companies like AstraZeneca, you know, globally. Next slide, please. The main thing I want to talk about today is our Impact 2025 sustainability strategy. You know, this is really how we're, you know, consolidating our efforts, our global efforts to drive and improve performance. Our strategy is broken down into 3 categories: products, performance, and partners. We're trying to minimize our product impacts, minimize our operational impacts, and maximize our positive impacts through our partners. On the product side, you know, if you think about Berry, we're a plastic packaging and product manufacturer. And unfortunately, plastics, we believe that they are a tremendous material, and I think we'll all agree that they really are an amazing material, but we recognize that plastics do have a circularity issue, quite frankly, and that you know, there has been some negativity around plastics, and there is a very real marine debris issue. So Berry, as a leading global company, wants to take a leadership role on addressing that and the transition to a circular economy where we would no longer have plastic waste. And some of the efforts we're taking there are, you know, to optimize design, such as through lightweighting. You know, we talk about greenhouse gas emissions, and when we lightweight a product, we use less natural resources, and that decreased use of resources, if you look at our scopes 1, 2, 3 greenhouse gas footprint, it makes its way the whole way through. The less material we process, ultimately, you know, the more efficient we will be. And then we're designing 100% of our packaging being reusable, recyclable, or compostable by, you know, just, you know, the goals on most of these are 2025. It is our Impact 2025 sustainability strategy after all. But we're working to improve design to ensure that these plastic packaging is not lost from the recycling stream and the waste stream, and is instead, you know, a valuable resource that we can recover. And another thing we're driving on that is sustainable sourcing. You know, we want to increase our recycled content. Today, really, there's only suitable recycled content for bottles. You know, there's a lot of bottle recycling going on, and bottles have been approved for. When you look at films and other packaging, there really isn't that strong stream of recycled content to use back into those food contact packages. And so we're trying to increase our access and use of recycled content to ultimately drive that demand, to ensure that our products at end of life have demand, have value, and are not lost as waste. Because if we can give them value, then, you know, similarly to like the aluminum can, right? You won't see those littered. You'll see those, you know, stay in the system. You know, most of what I want to talk about today is actually on the performance side. You know, similar to what Michael shared with AstraZeneca, we have goals along the lines of greenhouse gas emissions, energy, water, and waste. When you look at all of those, Berry is a big energy user. Globally, we actually use over 5 terawatt hours of electricity. And we're not really a big water user, and we're not a big waste generator. You know, people often think about plastic waste, but in our operations, we're able to recycle most of the waste we generate. So in terms of, you know, for every pound we process, we send less than 1 pound to landfill, to put it in perspective. So we, you know, we've really focused on greenhouse gas emissions and energy reduction. hopefully, and I take this back. Hopefully you are familiar with the Science-Based Targets Initiative, but I don't expect most people would be familiar with the Science-Based Targets Initiative. But our greenhouse gas goal, as stated, a 25% reduction by 2025 versus the 2016 baseline, is a science-based target, which is in alignment with limiting global warming to 2 degrees C. And actually, I bring this up because we think that this is a very important initiative for companies to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in line with what science says is necessary. And so this target stated on this slide is a 2 degrees C target. We're actually in the process of setting a more aggressive 1.5 degrees C target. So rather than limiting global warming to 2 degrees C, we're going to limit it to 1.5 degrees C. So that is a more aggressive target, even though it's a lower number, which often slips people up. But we you know, that's a really high priority for us. And then on partners, you know, these are how we execute our things. We are a big company, but obviously we can always do more by working with others. So we really want to drive our positive efforts through partnerships with our employees, partnerships with our communities, customers, etc. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're a really big energy user and have a significant focus on energy. Last year, we rolled out a 1 million kilowatt hour challenge that was just intended to be a short-term employee engagement activity. I'm not really sure how long we thought it was going to last, but we committed that it would last until we had reduced 1 million kilowatt hours of electricity demand from our operations. And every now and then you roll out an employee engagement activity that just really hits the spot. And this is one that quite frankly hit the spot, so to speak. The 1 million kilowatt hour challenge ended up reducing over 9 million kilowatt hours. It was just very effective at as I said, employee engagement. You know, so we've actually this year in 2021 turned it into the 100 million kilowatt hour challenge, you know, increasing our goal 100-fold. And we actually have a daily email that goes out every single day. I know Michael will remember Jim Belvis. Jim Belvis sends out these energy reduction emails every single day to try to encourage our sites on a variety of topics. And then obviously, since they go out every day, we've touched hundreds. We're actually in the 300s. He counts his emails, and it's in the 300s now. And it's on topics such as, you know, obviously compressed air, LED lighting. If you have not replaced your lighting with LED lighting, that's typically a 1 to 2 year payback. That's probably the lowest hanging fruit for anyone on this webinar if you've not done so already. You know, if you use a lot of compressed air, there's always compressed air leaks. That's unfortunately the gift that keeps giving is compressed air leaks. You know, motor management, HVAC, but we're tracking the overall kilowatt hour reduction as well as then taking that into the greenhouse gas savings, because energy is our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. So to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we have to reduce energy. And when we want our employees to know that these are very intimately, closely related. It's the same thing. We don't need to get involved in calculations for greenhouse gas emissions. Just reduce energy, and we know we're doing the right thing. Next slide, please. And then one of the other exciting things that we've been working on here locally is you know, partnering with the local Evansville MRF, which stands for Materials Recovery Facility, basically our local recycling facility, which I'll tell you today does not recycle. They accept polypropylene, but they ultimately do not recycle it. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Mainly it's that, you know, humans can easily identify bottles. Plastic bottles, 96% are either PET or high density polyethylene. So a human on a sorting line can easily sort plastic bottles into, you know, sellable commodities. When it gets into things like polypropylene, which is Barry's most common plastic in Evansville, it's a lot more difficult for a human to identify and sort polypropylene. So we've been working with the local MRF and AMP Robotics. Go ahead and start the video. Yeah, we've been working with them to install, this will be coming later this year, so it's not here yet. But a robot, this is a robotic arm, a robot that will sort polypropylene in our local Evansville MRF recycling facility. And so you see how it works, and it can actually, you see here on the right side, it identifies that as a vision system that's able to identify every item. So while our interest is sorting polypropylene, we anticipate it'll have available capacity to also sort high density polyethylene. But ultimately its capacity will be fully used. Anytime it has downtime, it will sort an item. So if a different if polypropylene is not coming down the belt and it has capacity, it will sort, you know, whether it be high density polyethylene, it'll sort the next item. So we're really excited about this to really, as I said, close the loop, transition to a circular economy globally, as well as especially here in Evansville, because Evansville is our global headquarters. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to, since this is something coming, I want to make sure that everyone on this webinar can recognize polypropylene articles and recycle these polypropylene articles, which are very, very commonplace. Once you get outside of bottles, polypropylene is the most common rigid plastic. So if you see this top row, this is really what we would consider dairy, whether it's, you know, margarine spreads, yogurt, Cool Whip, sour cream. 99% of dairy is in polypropylene. So we want to make sure that you're recycling those articles, because we will have, hopefully in April, I don't want to commit to the time, but very soon we will have this ability. And, you know, why wait, right? Like, go ahead and get ahead of it and start practicing these habits so that you can learn and be ready for it. On the second row, very frequently in fast food, quick service restaurants, if you see McDonald's, Subway, Starbucks, Taco Bell, Freddy's, who have I not named this local? So many restaurants use polypropylene, most often for their large cups. Small and medium cups tend to be paper. I'm a sustainability guy. I don't want to get into why that difference is. I'm not sure. But the large cups tend to be polypropylene. And, you know, it's a very recyclable substrate. And then similarly here on the far right, this is supposed to represent both microwave frozen food containers as well as takeout containers. You know, obviously now in the pandemic, I'll tell you that we've been getting, you know, takeout more often. And a lot of times it comes in these polypropylene containers because polypropylene is microwavable. Styrofoam, we do not make styrofoam. Styrofoam is not microwavable. Do not microwave in styrofoam. Whereas these polypropylene containers are microwavable. So we're seeing more of these in the market as, and we actually don't make those specific containers. We do make the cups. We make the cups right here in Evansville. The Subway cup, the Taco Bell cup, those are proud Evansville products. But with the takeout containers, that's just another thing that's not necessarily a berry product, but a recyclable product that I want you to be familiar with. And then just to touch on a couple of other these, prescription vials, once again, 99% of prescription vials are polypropylene. So that's another potential stream. With caps and closures, I'm going to talk about that more on the next slide. These are small, and we shouldn't put small articles in the recycling bin. And you might say, well, the yogurt cup and the prescription vials are small too. The caps are just a little bit smaller, and that's why it's actually a 2-inch rule. If something's smaller than 2 inches in all dimensions, you should not put that in the recycling bin. It's probably going to fall out and become a contaminant. And then cat litter buckets are actually one of the first most recycled items for polypropylene. It was it was one of the just high volume items, quite frankly, that kind of led to the growth of the rest of polypropylene recycling. And I won't bore you with all the benefits of polypropylene, but I'll tell you that we use a lot of it because when you do the math, it really works out to have typically the lowest environmental footprint. You know, producing the raw material polypropylene generates less greenhouse gas emissions than creating any other plastic. Plus, it's the least dense, so we're going to make articles that weigh the least and therefore use less plastic, generate less emissions, etc. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, bottle caps are quite small and should not be put in the recycling stream on their own. And so this is a situation that hopefully is educational for you. I know when recycling first rolled out, they said, take your caps off. And unfortunately, very few consumers did that. So they ultimately, the recyclers had to put in processes to recover that separate cap material. And now that the recyclers have those processes, they want you to recycle those caps because it's extra material for them. And I think we all know it's not going to go to waste. It's going to get recycled. Very positive. So please, please don't recycle your caps separately. Leave the caps on your bottles. And yes, that is a change from when recycling first rolled out, which is why we need to really emphasize it now. Next slide, please. Yeah, so, you know, just to summarize, Berry is really proactively addressing sustainability in our operations and communities, you know, whether through the 100 million kilowatt hour challenge to reduce 42,000 metric tons of CO2, or through our local partnerships in Evansville to improve recyclability of the products we make. You know, Barry is proactively taking these steps and really trying to be a positive force in our communities. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. This is Scott Fisher at Mead Johnson RB. Thanks for everybody's attendance today with all the inclement weather. Appreciate the attendance. So we're going to cover today sort of our RB Mead Johnson methods of driving sustainability improvements in your organization, with really a key focus on sort of a sustainability preset and how your organization can use some of the methods that we use to drive improvements in your group. So during the presentation, you'll get sort of a high-level snapshot of how we define sustainability. We'll break that down into a couple different pieces and peel the layers back so that you can see a view of how your employees within your organization can also drive similar improvements. So go ahead and jump into the next slide. So for the sustainability preset, you know, the EPA basically states that they want to create and maintain conditions under which humans and nature can coexist in sort of a harmony to permit productive harmony that permits fulfilling the social, economic, and other requirements for present and future generations. Within this, there's sort of three pillars that we view and follow. And those three pillars are the social, environmental, and economic pillars. Critical for this discussion, obviously, is the environmental pillar, but it's important to recognize that these three must interact well, not only within the community, but within your organizations. So for RB, we have chosen to follow the international standard of ISO 14001. Essentially, this environmental management system as a tool does achieve a balance between these three core pillars without compromising the ability of these future generations to meet the needs. Developing your own, for each individual company, it's important for you to identify what your corporate priorities are. And in our case, I won't get into all the details about the 2025 and 2030 objectives and so forth, but it's important to recognize how you drive focus within your organization and shape that around these three particular pillars with environmental as a key focus. Go ahead and click. And then next slide. So when you create a roadmap, something that we've spent a lot of time on in the last few years is really trying to understand from a business compass perspective. You have to look at your vision, missions, values, etc. within your organization and understand how you want to shape your organization to adapt to these and how you want to train your employees and teach, in fact, the floor employees to drive these goals. So all interested parties of the business don't just include your employees within, it includes the families, regulatory authorities that your company can impact, shareholders, suppliers, etc. Go ahead and click to the next. One more. And then finally the third. So the life cycle assessment is what we'll focus on next. This really has to do with all the resources, material processing, product manufacturing, and distribution of all the materials incoming and outgoing within your companies. Next. So to cover this sort of deep dive on the life cycle assessment, I'm going to let Joe Tyndall speak to this to a certain extent, starting with the resources component.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Joe Tyndall. I'm our senior utility and environmental engineer here in the Evansville Mead Johnson site. So the first thing we want to talk about is the life cycle assessment is all aspects that influence the environment, from our resources to material processing. This could be third-party manufacturing, the manufacturing or assembly of the product within our facilities, the distribution of the product, and the use and the end life. So the first step in the life cycle assessment is resources. So consider the origin of raw materials and how they're extracted. Next is the material processing. So we want to define the environmental standards and make sure that we have influence over these approved suppliers of ours. And then the product manufacturing, this is the emissions to air, emissions to water, our waste recycling programs, and our waste to landfill that we have in our control at our facilities. The next in the life cycle is distribution. So we want to make sure that we partner with logistical partners with similar goals. An example of this would be, we want to reduce consumption of natural resources. A distribution company maybe that has similar goals, that they say that the emissions of transportation is one of their goals. We want to partner with them and make sure that we are achieving that together as a partnership. Next is use. So this is how this is your marketing tools and the use instructions on the product that it's going to influence the customer. And then end of life. This is what options does the customers have? Think of a coffee cup. Are you composting the bottom half and recycling the top half? What options are you giving them for that? Are you reusing some of the packaging? Are you recycling? Is there waste to energy options that they have? Or is the end result going to be landfill? So as we peel back another layer, with the audience today being the Tri-State Manufacturers Alliance, it's appropriate for us to focus on the product manufacturing stage. And as a corporate group, if you're in a corporation, they could be driving these other influences and be creating the environmental standards for these other components. Next, click. Can we click?
You're there.
Okay. So within product manufacturing, we have opportunities that exist to reduce the energy and carbon footprints. Examples are improved OEE and continuous improvement to the product design to minimize the life cycle impacts to the extent feasible. So what I would encourage everyone on the call is to take credit for the capital investments here, that the businesses of the business decisions that was driven mainly by the economics, but has some great energy and waste efficiencies along with that. Scott, did you have anything to add with that step?
Yeah, so I think it's important, as we went through the process to try to adapt, Mead Johnson was purchased by RB, which is a European company, a couple of years ago. So as we work to adapt sort of our pillars to those of the global company, there were some new objectives that we had to meet, and some of these were very challenging. I imagine that there's companies out there who are just now starting to get involved in driving some high level efficiency gains, energy reduction, et cetera, that there's new challenges and that it's a shift in the business strategy. That's really what we've been facing and focused on the last couple of years. So with that, and Joe had mentioned that the capital investments, depending on your business, you can focus on different areas. I think AZ had a lot of great examples of some significant capital investments to drive waste out of the business. You really have to take a look internally and see what your particular business is capable of in order to drive these within a reasonable time frame and also within the cost that you can control within the business. So one thing that we've noticed is that we've got a lot of processes that are legacy, and a lot of these processes can be adapted to meet the new objectives and goals, whether it's energy usage reduction, water usage reduction, et cetera. But the key is really to get all the stakeholders within the business to understand that the new capital investments and where you're going in the future, there has to be a key consideration for all of these opportunities, whether it's energy, recycling, landfill to waste considerations, so that when you purchase new equipment or take on a new process, that it's not a low priority to consider how much these are affected. 30 years ago, it was a different priority than what it is today. And it's important for the organization really to understand those key attributes as you work and focus on the three pillars and drive that within your group as you move forward in years ahead.
So the next item here is source green energy. As we see, you know, in a tri-state here, we got a lot of solar farms that are popping up in the area. Michael's mentioned his interest in his slide deck of solar farms, so we would encourage you to look at that as an option to source green energy, but also consider non-traditional methods, because there could be some success in that. And the Mead Johnson site has been using a renewable biogas from the landfill to create steam power since 2009, which was a very unorthodox method at the time, but has shown to be a good commitment for the site and the community itself.
Yep. So a comment on energy supply. So large companies generally have a little bit more leeway to either invest in solar energy generation or purchase in through RECs or renewable energy credits to sort of offset sort of the demand and that side of the supply for energy. You know, if you're a smaller company and you don't necessarily have the capital to jump in that deep, considerations can be made for how you source your energy, but really the key there is around reduction of usage. So that needs to be, again, each company is going to be unique. Some of you out there in a small group, you may want to shape your focus really around reduction of the consumption ahead, while the grid and the renewable energy supply comes online and drives those costs down.
And just to comment a little bit more on that, just know your compass, create that compass, and create the balance between those three pillars. So if we go ahead and click. Next is the recycling programs that you could have in-house. You know, Rob did a great job mentioning some of the Berry Global initiatives that they have, but some simple ones that any size manufacturing company can have is pallet recirculation from some of their suppliers. Those are great programs. They reduce quite a bit of carbon. Baling cardboard, dedicated bins for plastics, as Rob had mentioned here. You know, just your waste streams are going to fluctuate, and this is just going to be a continuous pursuit and networking to make sure that, you know, we are doing our due diligence with the recycling and trying to keep that diversion rate as high as we can.
And on the waste piece as well. So, you know, I think a couple of the presentations mentioned sort of a zero waste to landfill initiative, and those are really picking up a lot of steam. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of significant local presence of the waste to energy capability. You know, something for the tri-state to consider is not only driving these programs within each company, but also driving the capability within the tri-state to bring a lot of these capabilities locally, so that the transportation of waste is also reduced in sort of a holistic view. Okay.
Click. So there's a representative model there that, yeah, we can take our waste, and there is regional areas. Mike had mentioned Covanton, Indianapolis. There's some in St. Louis, but there are some negative impacts of the emissions and the natural resource depletion of the logistics of getting them to those facilities to get those back into the grid. That as economy to scale and more people become committed to these, that, you know, a local incineration facility would drive additional benefits for sustainability. Next slide.
Okay, so last slide here to talk about just a few tips. There's a tremendous amount of guidance and information available through not only the EPA, but the Paris Climate Organization. Renewable Energy 100 is another one that again, these organizations, if you're just getting involved in sustainability efforts, there is so much information, and these groups are very, very willing to provide guidance and support for really no cost. So if you're a smaller or a mid-sized company, really just trying to define your path on how you start to get involved and make progress in these areas, I wouldn't hesitate to lean on these groups. They're very willing to help. Michael had mentioned IDEM. IDEM has been a great partner for us as well. So don't hesitate to reach out. They're very willing to help with these initiatives. You know, with respect to RE100 specifically, this initiative, we've been able to partner with them in not only locally, but with our partners within RB globally to help us identify specific ideas as well on how we get to 100% sooner than what we ever thought would be possible using sort of our own local knowledge base. So with that, I think what we wanted to cover is really not what RB Mead Johnson is doing within and of itself, but really trying to explain that there's a lot of different methodologies available that you can adapt to help define your path to improvement in this area, and not get caught up in too many of the details and the cost at this point, because the economies of scale are driving the cost down for renewable energy. And we believe, even as a large company, that for the community to get on board with these programs will help everybody, even if you take small steps at first, that we'll all get there in the long run. Okay, so we'll kick it back to Dorothy, and if there's questions for the groups.
Hi, everyone. I do have one question for you. Where did it go? How do you drive a culture of sustainability in your workforce? Does anybody have any examples that they can share about how you really got your employees involved in getting on board with this?
I can field that question at AZ. You know, I came from a large coal-fired power facility, so it was quite a culture shock when I came here to see, you know, at first I thought, you know, I'm used to a top-down management system and a bargaining unit environment, but I was pleased to see the participation of people from all aspects of the organization in small work groups and teams, value stream mapping processes, looking for waste. I mean, we have a lean idea card process here, which at first to me seemed overly cumbersome, and, you know, but we've got people in our OPEX group, our Six Sigma improvement groups. They track these, they get approved, and they filter their way to the top for ideas that the members of the green team look at, and we weigh out. And so that's been a tremendous effort. The Lean Idea Card program drives sustainability. People feel like their ideas are being heard. If they don't get approved, they get told why, they get feedback. So, you know, with 700 employees, you know, we're not a large company with thousands of employees at this site, but it's manageable. We've got people managing it, and the feedback piece is important, getting that feedback back to the employee. I mean, just all kinds of safety ideas. They're categorized by energy, safety, water, what have you, and things get value stream mapped so that they're concepted and understood, and an ROI attached to it. And we have a separate arm of the organization, separate from our normal CapEx process, that funds those type of projects.
Thank you. Anyone else want to talk about how they've done that with the culture?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go next. You know, so I think it's important to have both a top-down and a bottoms-up approach. You know, if you think about top-down, our CEO, Tom Salmon, every time he speaks, he talks about the benefits of plastics, and then about how we need to lead the charge as a leader in the plastics industry to bring the rest of the industry along with us as more circular. So, you know, we have the top-down with our leadership consistently driving these messages. But then with sustainability especially, it's so great to also have a bottoms-up approach, because we have so many young people that have come in and are asking for it and saying, what are we doing? And they want to be involved. So it's not simply top down. You know, we also have, you know, Barry has a strong teams culture. We have a plastics ambassadors network. We have green teams at many of our sites. And these teams at the site level are what allow employees to get directly involved and engaged in these issues that matter to them. And so combining the top down and bottoms up, I think we've, we're certainly not perfect, but every year we're better.
Thank you.
Yeah, and from a RB Mead Johnson perspective too, sort of to piggyback off of Rob's comments, the top-down piece is more in line, at least from our perspective, with capital investment and future growth, and how we make sure that those investments are tied in with our key environmental objectives. But a powerful piece of getting the employees on board for us has been really base floor level production, team level education on the basics of what these KPIs and metrics are. We have daily review of all of our key KPIs for every shift. And with that, what we've found is when the employees as a whole understand what these objectives are very clearly, that they are often the experts for the process. So they may not be driving large capital investments around this, but what we find is their expertise on the processes that exist have driven the majority of our savings efforts quickly from a floor level. So that employee involvement sort of on a repetitive basis and giving them the power to sort of lead ideas and engage with the management teams has been a big piece of our effort in getting to our objectives.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question for someone for AstraZeneca. For what are the one or two projects which have been most consequential for your site?
I mentioned the modeling efforts we've had. Over time, as this facility has grown, migrated from Bristol Myers Squibb to AstraZeneca, the number of air handlers that have become dots on top of the roof, if you will. I mean, when you start looking at the amount of utility consumption these things use and understanding the correct amount of air required in each production suite. I mean, every product's different. So we've had tremendous efforts in resizing the amount of air used, how we do it, how we control it, efficiencies, insulation savings on piping systems, doing audits of that. And as I mentioned, a typical air handler, when you buy it, it's a large motor with an average service factor, maybe belt driven. So there's efficiency losses there. So these fan wall arrays that I mentioned we're doing in key areas have really precisely allowed us to produce the correct amount of tempered air without, if a room needs 10 air changes, then we're not providing 15, we're providing 10. So there's been considerable effort there in our chill water system, energy savings, and controls modernization, that sort of thing, in conjunction with the temperature and pressure set points with the cooling towers we have, looking at cooling water sourced to the chillers and changing that delta T, if you will. So those sorts of things have driven tremendous amount of savings while we're still providing the correct set points to the processes. And we're growing, we mentioned we've grown our volume 26%, and we're still able in one calendar year to cut our energy consumption 10 to 12%. So, there's so much low-hanging fruit in air handler optimization.
Thank you, Michael. I have another question. Does each company presenting have a plastic circular recycling effort? Waste processed and returned for reuse? And if not, are companies looking for external outlets for their processed plastic waste stream? Who would like to take that?
Here, I'll go first as the, primarily plastics company. So we have lots of programs. As I said, we're striving for 100% reusable, recyclable, compostable across our fast moving consumer goods packaging by 2025, as well as an average of 10% recycled content. With our local operations, I mean, really, we've we don't landfill plastics. Plastics are recyclable, post-industrial plastics especially, that are sorted and we understand the material. That is not a stream that would get landfilled, especially in our operation where we have our own recycling equipment for post-industrial scrap. So we are making lots of efforts on the post-consumer side, and on the post-industrial side, I mean, quite frankly, that's something Barry's understood for decades. And, you know, it's very easy to see if you're paying to landfill something versus if you recycle that same material and you can use it back in your own process. That's a very tight recycling loop that's well understood and one that was easy for us to address, much easier than the post-consumer piece, which we're now going after and is a lot more complex.
From RB's perspective on this one, we do have some areas where we feel like we've got a good circular process here with respect to dunnage. So we do a lot of returnable dunnage, plastic pallet programs where we're not sending anything to waste, and we're able to bring those back through, get them cleaned and sanitized as we bring them back into the process. So we're making a lot of progress. But to be frank, we have a lot of challenges as well. You know, we do have a fairly large number of polypropylene bottles that we bring through our process as well. And due to the sensitivity of some of our materials, we're not able to recycle those yet. That's something that we hope that as technology evolves and some of the robotics that Rob showed, there's going to be opportunities here, hopefully in the near term, to close that gap. So that some of these components can be recycled that would currently go to sort of an incineration type process. So there's certainly opportunities. We're not 100% there from a circular perspective, but we look forward to, you know, as the technologies evolve, that we get there.
Okay, I have another question. Besides cardboard boxes, are you incinerating used items like general HVAC filters and other items like that?
So from RB's perspective on, we'll call it maybe at a higher level, maintenance waste or construction and maintenance waste. So right now, many of those items are not going to incineration from our side.
And I'm happy to add in here that we, you know, both of the other companies on the webinar this morning discussed incineration. I'm not necessarily anti-incineration, but I'm not pro-incineration either. And I think everyone on the panel is going to agree that that shouldn't be your first step. We should always prioritize recycling and reuse over energy recovery. So here locally at our Evansville site, you know, as was mentioned by the panelists, the nearest incineration with energy recovery facility is in Indianapolis. And we don't, you know, when we talk about the environmental impacts of the additional trucking, et cetera, today, Barry Evansville is not taking advantage of that. We have, you know, dozens of zero waste sites across the world. You know, I think about, you know, Baltimore, Maryland here in the US, one of our Tennessee sites. You know, if you're close to an incineration facility that has energy recovery, I'm not opposed to that. But at this point in time, especially in Evansville, and considering the long trucking, it's not a priority.
AstraZeneca has a different viewpoint, you know, with the compaction techniques that we're using. You know, we weigh in the CO2 calculations for trucking, the number of loads that go to landfill, like I said, for just the paper waste in our offices and things like that. You know, we had 12 loads a week coming out of the offices and the cafeteria, and now we may have one compactor box leaving site every 2.5 to 3 weeks. So we've looked at it from that vantage point. We've got pharma and gowning waste going already. So in our case, some of the HVAC filters, particularly paper filters and that sort of thing, might be laden with product dust anyway. So they're going to be commingled with pharma product waste that would be incinerated. So we've got a different look at it because we've got pharma waste going there already. So our justification has been in our compaction techniques and how well the types of compactors we've purchased, how we compact, and how many loads we've reduced. As Robert said, it's 3 hours in a truck to Indianapolis, but the way we do it and the way we minimize the number of loads and our contractual work we've done negotiating that, you know, and the value of it being repurposed for steam energy instead of going in the landfill. But you know, I heard mentioned before, people talk, you know, this circular plastics programs. We have come a tremendous way in our reuse and recycling efforts. You know, like you said, I heard RB talk about plastic pallets. We used to take those and send those off site and they'd be cleaned and come back. We're doing that here now. And things are getting reused. We have pallet changers. We've bought some pallet stackers and changers, and so pallets, fiber drums, lids, all those sorts of things. Our money's being spent in the reuse of those and recycling. You know, you don't get a lot of money for cardboard, but what we don't reuse, we recycle, and before it even gets considered for incineration. So what we're incinerating is really you know, the last ditch effort.
And I want to touch on the very last thing Michael said. Cardboard prices fluctuate monthly, and if you've not looked at them in the last 3 months, they're decent right now. They're pretty good prices right now, especially if you get a full truckload.
Yeah, that's a fair
statement. Those prices have been very low at points in the last year.
Yeah, they're coming back. You're right.
So I'd like to, being respectful of everyone's time, I do have a couple of questions that primarily deal with, you know, one of you mentioned that you do look to work with like-minded people in the industry. And I think that there's some interest on, you know, is there a best practice for, you know, making sure that locally, you know, who those companies are that maybe do share your vision and, you know, may be a very good resource for you.
What was there a question? I think that's a great opportunity. Was that a statement or a question? I agree.
It's a question.
Is there? I mean, we should share best practices, and I think this is a great forum to do so. And we probably need additional forums, but no, we should always. We're all better together.
Well, I think there's just a few people. You know, we have someone that's looking at, you know, how do you handle your the decommissioned equipment. We have someone who's looking at, you know, how do you handle PIR plastic, which I don't know what that means. But, you know, I see that this is an opportunity for some of our other members to try to generate a partnership with you as far as working together. And it can be difficult to know exactly how to reach out to you. So, you know, just, is there a best practice that comes with that, of trying to get in and actually share what they do, our other members? That makes sense.
Yeah, I would say that certainly TSMA is the start of sort of that partnership and that communication. I'm not aware personally of any other sub-forum where people can reach out with questions and so forth, but 100% open to emails, phone calls, etc. From anybody who has questions, and obviously we're not going to have all the answers, but collectively, as a tri-state, I think the industry can really come up with solutions to help each other with this.
Thank you for that. I think that's a great way to unfortunately end this part of the presentation. I'm going to let Josh Gilbert give us our closing. As a reminder though, please send any unanswered questions if you want to send them to me, and I'll make sure that they get to our speakers. Go ahead, Josh. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yep, sorry, had to get the mute button turned off there. So, you know, certainly we appreciate the time and effort of all the panel participants that put their hard work into the presentation. So Michael, Robert, and Scott, thank you all for the time. I think it was a very informative discussion, and appreciate the information that was provided. Again, special thanks to all of our sponsors for the event today. I did want to touch on the clean sweep slide. Operation Clean Sweep Journey. It's helping plastic manufacturers achieve zero pellet, zero pellet, flake, and powder loss. Event that's coming up, and the topics will include societal expectations on eliminating plastic waste, overview of Operations Clean Sweep, and SABIC's journey to achieving zero pellet, flake, and powder loss. The feature presenter will be SABIC. It's on March 10th from 8 to 9 a.m. Via video conference, and you can register by visiting the Chamber website. I always want to encourage our members and participants to follow us. So information on the Clean Sweep, as well as all the TSMA events are available on social media and in the TSMA newsletter. And you can connect with Dorothy if you have any questions or need some help registering for any future events. And finally, thank you for participating in this event, and we look forward to seeing you either at the peer groups or at the next Q2 event. Thank you and have a good day.